Okay, welcome everybody. So yeah, it's welcome. This is our regular Saturday class here, and this is at the end of every module. Of course, I like just doing a little bit of a review or discussion just with the material. So I know I always remember just talking to Dharma friends over the years. You don't want just to be sort of a free for all where all you just hang out every Saturday and just at the top here, because then you don't. It's kind of like pointless. It's just you're not getting into any good material. But at the same time, you don't want to sort of load on too much stuff too either with people. You have to sort of check up and just see what's sticking, and if people have questions or whatever, and go over. So I'm hoping to balance that out with every little class. So at the end of it we can have a discussion. So let me just get started here. I'm just going to do a quick Ganden Gyema, and then we can get into the discussion here. So again, you can follow along if you want. Otherwise, just close your eyes and listen here. I go for refuge to the triple gem. I shall burn all sentient beings and lead them to enlightened state. I drink purely in enlightened motive. I go for refuge to triple gem. I shall burn all sentient beings, lead them to enlightened state. I drink purely in enlightened motive. I go for refuge to triple gem. I shall burn all sentient beings, lead them to enlightened state. I drink purely in enlightened motive. May the surface of the earth in every direction be pure, without even a pebble, as smooth as the palm of a child's hand, is naturally polished as is lapis lazuli. May all space be completely filled with material offerings of gods and men, both those set up before me and those mentally created, as a peerless goddess cemented by these offerings. From the heart of the protector hundreds of deities of the land of joy comes a cloud which resembles a mass of fresh white curd. Omniscient Tsongkhapa, king of the Dharma, together with your sons, I request you to come here now. The venerable Guru smiled to us white smiles of delight. Seated on lion thrones, lotus and moon, the space before me, I request you to remain for hundreds of aeons in order to spread the teachings and be the supreme field of merit for my mind of faith. Your minds have the intellect that comprehends the full extent of what can be known. Your speech has excellent explanations, becomes the ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your bodies are radiantly handsome with glory and renown. I prostrate to you to behold, to hear, and to recall is worthwhile. Placing water offerings, various flowers, fragrant incense, lights, and scented water, an ocean of action visualized cloud-like offerings I present to you, supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind have accumulated from beginningless time, and especially any transgressions of my three vows, I confess over and again with fervent regard from my heart. From the depths of our hearts, we rejoice, O protectors, in the great wave of your deeds, you who strove to learn and practice in this degenerate age, and made life meaningful by abandoning the eight worldly feelings. O holy and venerable Lamas, from the clouds of your compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. I dedicate whatever virtues I've ever collected for the benefit of all teachings and all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Tsongkhapa to shine forever. Mandala offering here. By directing the fields of Buddhas, this mandala on a base resplendent with flowers, saffron, water, and incense, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon, may all sentient beings be led to these Buddha fields. Om Nam Guru Radha Mandala Community Amen. By the force of having me fervently requested in this way, hollow rays of white light are admitted from the hearts of Venerable Father and his two sons, the end of which combine into one enter the crown of my head. White nectar, the color of milk, that comes through the pathway of the tubes of white light, I am cleansed of all sickness, disturbance, non-virtues, obstacles, and instincts without exception. My body becomes as pure and as clear as crystal. You are Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, Manjushri, master of flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroy the hordes of demons without exception. Tsongkhapa, my crown jewel, the sage of the land of snows, Tsongkhapa, on my request at your feet. So just sing it 3 times here. Make me say wei cher chen chen rei zi. Pri me ken pe wang po cham pa ya. Yu pung ma lu chom se sang wei da. Gan chen ke pe sun kien song ka pa. Lo sang dra pe sha. La so wa de. Mig me se wei cher chen chen rei zi. Pri me ken pe wang po cham pao ya. Du pung ma lu jom se sang wei da. Gan chen ke pe sun kien song ka pa. Lo Sandra Peja Blaso Wade. Mig me say way chen razy. Free me can pay wang po jam ya. Du pu ma lu chom say sang wei da. Gan chen ke pe sung kien song ga. O Sandra Be Shabla So Wade. O glorious and precious Ruku, please come take your lotus and moon seed, place here upon my head, and keep me safe with your great kindness. Bestow me, please, the powerful attainments of your body, speech, and mind. Glorious and precious Ruku, please come take your lotus and moon seed in my heart. Keep me safe with your great kindness, remain steadfast until I achieve Buddha. By this merit, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha, and may I lead into that state every being without exception. Actually, because sorry, I'm so turned around a little bit, I'm just going to usually recite the Heart Sutra first. I'm just going to recite this now. And this is to dispel obstacles, but just to always set our view that no matter what we're doing here in class, that we're always motivated by emptiness, and just have that as our main view. Homage to perfection, wisdom, the Blessed Mother. As I've heard at one time, the Blessed Mother was dwelling in Rajgir in Mass Vulture's Mountain, the other great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound emanation. That time, also, Superior Valakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the practice of profound perfection of wisdom, looking perfectly at the emptiness of inherent existence and also the five aggregates. The power Buddha Venerable Shariputra said to Superior Valakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Spiravalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly at the emptiness of inherent existence and also the five aggregates. Form is empty and emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are merely empty, having no characteristics. Do not produce and do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, so forth, up to no mind element, and also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing under beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the perfection of wisdom, became manifest, complete Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal of the unequal mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayatam Gata Gata Paragata Parasam Gati Bodhisoha. Shariputra Bodhisattva, the great being, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose to that concentration, said to Spirit of Valakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good, O son of lineage, is like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, Spirit of Valakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed. Okay, great. That to me is always just like medicine, and it's very important to do. Also, just to remind me when to shut up and remember that everything's emptiness. So, and nice to see everybody. So, what do you guys want to talk about? Any questions? Or it's nice to chat a little bit about the class in particular. Valid Cognition, and just sort of the stuff that sort of gone over the last little bit, but doesn't have to necessarily be about that. everyone's good here. Like we're not bringing up, I don't know, Roswell and aliens or like or politics or something. I like how whenever we do this, we always sort of stick to Dharma questions and material, which is good. So any questions, comments? What do you guys think?
I can comment, Matthew.
Yes.
I suppose, it's just given me, I'm just rethinking it all, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very much a process of thinking about it in a really good way, but it's all been a very good reminder. I mean, new things, but then, oh yeah, right. And just, watching the mind and some good basic reminders.
Mm-hmm.
It's a path, it's a process.
Yeah.
And what's it all about again? What's the goal of the operation, right? So, there are extraneous questions. If anything really crucial comes up, I'll pop it out, but mostly it was a real opportunity for reflection and so thank you.
That's good. Well, thank you. Yeah, and this is just why we have Sangha and teachers and everyone to support. It is kind of educational journey, right? Kind of like a Jungian journey that we're all making here. So you need traveling companions and you need guides, and but also just like I say a lot of times, so much. Even just Sangha, when you get together, Sangha, so much of Dharma is just cheerleading each other, like going over the notes. And just, you can do it, yeah, man. It's just like, because everyone always has their times where you sort of feel low, or am I gonna quit, or I'm at a dead end, or I'm stuck in a deadlock. And so this is where you just have to again sort of apply the material, go over the teachings again, specifically spots where you're having the problem. But of course, always be in touch with your guides and teachers so you don't get lost. And then you need your traveling companions, even just for the company, and just sort of sometimes it's complaining or whatever, just knowing that you're sort of on the same journey or the same process. You really, even though the funny thing, there's all these paradoxes in spirituality and Buddhism too. You're fundamentally alone on this on one level, right? Solipsistically alone because of your karma. And then what's funny is there's no you anyway. So it's like, it's kind of strange, but at the same time, it's a shared journey with other people because you're all kind of heading towards the same place. Like I say, there's all sorts of these paradoxes. Kala Rinpoche, I see it every now and then. People put it on social media, that great quote where he said, I don't know when he said it, but it's a great quote. What is he said? Like, we live in illusion and dreamlike appearance of things. There is only one reality. We are that reality. When you see this, you see you are nothing. And being nothing, you are everything. That is all. That's like a famous quote and a great quote. But it kind of, I know everyone's like, oh, but it sort of shows, where you're at with that. Once, it's kind of funny. Right now, you think you're in this shared reality karmic wise, like you're all worried about the world and people and everybody's fighting, and you're just like family issues and stuff. But when you boil it down, it's your Jungian or existential journey. But the further you go down, you see that there actually isn't a self. And so by getting the self out of the way, ironically, you open up to the world, right? So you share everything with everyone. No, really, it's just me and my own process. You go deeper. Well, there's no self anyway. Then I'm united with the world. Like, it's sort of in and out, right? And so, like I said, there's these always kind of funny paradoxes. But that's why I always feel that you really, really do need good traveling companions. Sangha, as much as, having been president of a couple of temples over the years, what you got from a lot of people is wanting help, or people complaining about each other in the community, which is all spiritual communities are like that. It's like, do you have a question? Yeah, I have a problem. What's the problem? Well, I hate that Matthew guy. And then, okay, no worries. We're always kind of talking people off the edge there, because working with people is so hard. But like Trungpa said, that's one of the greatest resources we have, is the Sangha as the jewel, because if people are pushing your buttons, it shows that you've got buttons. And what are your buttons? Those are your issues. That's your karma, So it's one of the greatest resources you can have to change and progress and to self-perfect. but it's very, very difficult at the same time. So, but that is a resource. And we're, like I said, we're all doing this together. So it's nice to always be together, learning, checking back. And again, the Sangha jewel, by definition, I always like to sort of remind people, when the real sort of definition of Sangha jewel is people, Arya beings. In other words, who you take refuge in the Sangha, when you're taking refuge in the Sangha jewel, is people who've seen emptiness directly. Now, of course, how are you going to know that, right? You don't know, but but that's technically, in other words, all sort of people throughout history and even now that are having experience of emptiness. They're your refuge in terms of what the Sangha jewel really means, is refuge. But at the same time, sort of more figuratively, I always say that who's a good refuge are Sangha people that are really living the life, really doing it. Like, just like any community, it's all concentric circles, people that aren't really involved, people that just sort of do a little bit half-ass, people that are in it for the wrong reason, but then you get sort of a core group of people that are really, really doing it. And these are the people that are your real Dharma friends, where you're really trying to live the life and walk the path. And those are the people that really sort of sustain you and nurse you. So yeah, you're always coming back, going in and out. And sometimes people take breaks, and sometimes people, you have to sort of take 5. You're walking up the mountain, everyone takes 5 and has lunch and a tea. And you find that, Pema Chodron always called it like finding your edge. I guess that's kind of like a Shambhala thing, like the friction point where you're really working on your issues. And sometimes that's really hard. And well, it is really hard. And then you have to sort of take a step back and relax. And it's like, okay, give me a moment here while I process all this stuff. We always laughed going up the Grouse Grind years ago, where you meet people that have just run out of steam or are scared or whatever. Like, I don't know, when you go up. I remember we went up and there was this one class of kids and they were just done, like they'd all quit. And everyone was just like, they couldn't go down, but they couldn't go up. It was kind of funny. They were kind of stuck on that spot. Anyway, spiritual path is like that. It's in a lot of ways. So anything else, Maureen?
I had a question. I did. And it's great to see you, all of you.
Yeah.
The object, the 3 objects that you talked about one day was nirvana, omniscience, and Buddhahood. And I was wondering, because I've been reading the book Achieving Bodhicitta by Ken Rinpoche.
That's a great book.
Yeah. But he talks about, he's in the root text of the 7-point mind training that they, he studies it and then he just puts it, it's in the book. It says there are 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues. Are these the 3 objects, the same 3 objects? Like, because you said the 3 objects that we're trying to establish with valid perception were nirvana, omniscience, and Buddhahood. But when they refer to the 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues, is this the same 3 objects?
This is the tyranny of lists in Buddhism. No, I'm just, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. I'd have to look up that book. And there's so many overlapping lists. And then this is just, this is just an art tradition, Gelugpa tradition. We go to the Sakya Nyingma tradition, they have different lists. And then in different Buddhist traditions, you go to Zen or Pure Land or Theravada, they all have different lists. I don't know if there's a master list somewhere in the world that's, whatever they find, they dig it up in India somewhere where there actually is the 3 most important things or the 7 divisions of 21, this or that. But I don't, oftentimes with these lists, Mahamudra has a set of lists, Lojong, LamRim.
I wasn't really expecting.
So I don't know. That's a good question. Like it is funny. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
So I wasn't actually expecting. I just was hoping, because I'm going through the book going, okay, what are they talking about? I don't remember the 3 objects, but I just thought there might be an easy answer, but I wasn't expecting it. So I have another question.
Yeah, sure.
that relates just directly to this. Was to clarify the terms regular cognizer and yogic direct perceiver.
Okay, yeah.
So the regular cognizer is kind of like me, like I cognize things without seeing the emptiness of them. Is that what that means? And the yogic direct perceiver would be me when I realize emptiness?
Yeah, that's, I guess you could have that provisionally. That's a good way. Like, again, you know, with all, you know, with my philosophy training from a million years ago, it's always a question of how you define these terms, right? So it's, you know, how do you understand the differences in these concepts? And then of course, all my sort of more continental training, it's always to find the history of the concept. So, you know, this is being translated from Sanskrit, then going into Tibetan, and there's all different languages and different meanings of this and that. It gets quite confusing. But when you study LoRig, your mind and mental factors, and this is a whole thing. I think, you know, years ago I might have sort of done a little Sunday course, I can't remember, on this. Geshe Rabden's got a book, I think it's Mind and Its Functions. Geshe Zasep Rinpoche's got a book called Understanding the Mind. You can read, there's a bunch of them out there. I don't know. The FPMT might even have a course on this. You just do your research, see what's free, online. But the point is dividing the mind up into its different characteristics or functions, so you learn to understand it. But when you have just what they call just sort of a regular cognizer, that's a fancy word for just experiencing things with the mind, right? So the mind, you know, they have different names. Mind is knower, mind is object possessor. In other words, mind is, like how they used to call it in the school of phenomenology, intentional. And what intentionality means, that it's not like what I intend to get a glass of water, but it's that it's relatedness, the sense that mind is always in a relationship with an object. It's always knowing something. So you don't get a mind without an object. Then conversely, you don't get objects without a mind either. They go together in Buddhism. So when we talk about just sort of cognizing things or knowing things, it's just experiencing things, like seeing or knowing or thinking about an object, like, you know, my little Lama Chopa prayer book or something like that. Now, then they break that up to, you can have it directly knowing things or indirectly knowing things. So directly knowing things would be sensing things. So like, for instance, I see my black strapped watch, right? You know, we can talk about the sixth sense consciousnesses, you know, like I'm feeling it, I'm seeing it, I'm smelling it, or whatever. That's the idea that you're in a direct relationship, an experiential relationship with an object, right? So this is how it is in Buddhism. Like, there's all sorts of philosophies in the world religions that might even doubt this. How do I know I'm really seeing the watch and that this isn't whatever, a cup of coffee, or like, Buddhism, like, because it's more empiricist, it takes your experience not for granted, but it doesn't dispute the sense experience that you have. You know, if you say, we all say that we're here in the room meditating or seeing, you know, we were all in the room seeing whatever, this orange book, we take that for granted. That's a good starting point experientially in Buddhism. So what we'll end up disputing is, does this book exist in the way it appears to us? That's kind of a separate question. But on the whole, no one disputes that you're actually seeing a book here, right? So that's when we talk about direct cognition. Then you have indirect or inferential cognition, where you're trying to know something that's not directly presented to you. And this is where we use logic. This is where we're trying to get, the idea of understanding pramana or valid cognition, because so much of the world, or that we don't see directly. So you have to use reason. Like one thing Rinpoche said, and it's a classic Buddhist logic thing, is he said, you only need logic when something's not clear to you, right? So this is Wittgenstein always said, probably my favorite philosopher, like in questions of certainty or questions of verification, you only do that. That only makes sense in certain contexts, right? Like what he said is, if everyone's walking the street eating ice cream, if someone just says, I don't think we're really here eating ice cream, like just out of the blue, for the most part, how does everyone take that? They take that as a nonsensical question. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, unless what people end up asking is like, well, Matthew, are you saying something deep and spiritual here? But no one takes it literally true, right? It's just like when you do, there's all sorts of philosophy seminars you can go on to let's say, skepticism. And what I always remember, Noam Chomsky, I watched an interview with him because he did a lot of amazing stuff in linguistics and philosophy. And he always said, that stuff only makes sense in a university classroom. Like no one outside of that context ever asks those kinds of questions. Just in your day-to-day life, you don't. And the French philosopher Merleau-Ponty always said, even solipsists try and get a book deal. Like, even if you're trying to write a book that only you exist, you're still, who are you writing the book for? Who are you trying to get the book published for if only you exist? So anyway, the point is that where I'm going with this is that you only use logic and reason when something's hidden, right? If something's out in the open, you're not trying to reason about it because it's clear to you, right? I'm not saying, am I really here doing a Zoom call? I don't know, I'm not too sure. We know. So that's when you use what they call inferential reasoning or inferential cognizers. So then we can have based on logic or reason, whether they're valid or not. So this is the classic saying, is there smoke? If there's smoke, is there fire? So if we look in an apartment building and you hear sirens and you see smoke pouring out of the condo building and you're looking in the street upwards, we all say, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. That's a reasonable thing. Now, there's a question in always logic between validity and soundness, in the sense that we can draw that out to be a valid argument where we all say, yeah, that makes sense. It's reasonable to assume that. But if let's say we run into the building and check and see that it's a smoke machine, some kind of special effects smoke machine that someone's kid turned on to scare everybody, so the fire department comes and he thinks it's funny, then we see that that's the valid perception. The valid perception we had thinking the apartment was on fire is incorrect. Now we have new evidence. So in a lot of ways, you can see that Buddhism is empiricist, that we're always asking for evidence for things in our experience, right? And I think it's important to see that this is what ties us to yogic direct perceivers, that in the end, we have to get evidence for things. We have to have things proved to us experientially. So things can be proven logically in Buddhism, and you can see things clearly, but in the end, those are only inferential minds, right? And that's why it's important. Like, if you meet Buddhist professors or scholars or, even intellectuals like me or whatever, sometimes people will say, well, it's enough just to learn all this intellectually. But if that was the case, Buddha would have just written a textbook that you all read, and at the end you write an exam. Like, I've actually met people, I don't want to sit here and run people down, but I know a teacher, really, he was a good teacher. He was saying to me, we had kind of an argument over dinner in Toronto years ago, that we should be able to set up Buddhist universities here, like getting your nursing degree or your biology degree or whatever. Like, you do all this stuff. And he said it for Tantra. So at the end of it, you graduate, instead of going up with your gown, you get all your tantric implements and your chud drum, and then you get your degree and stamped in and I was like, well, on one level, that's true. You can learn all that stuff. But I was like, but that just has to be wrong on one level, because it's about cultivating certain transcendent experiences. It's not enough just to memorize books and dress up in a costume. And at the end of it, yeah, I'm a Mahasid. I put my 4 years in. I wrote my big thesis of whatever, 200,000 words. And here I am, and I'm enlightened now. I mean, I wish everyone wishes it was that easy, that you could get a degree, but it's about experience. You have to, so this kind of like a dialogue between practice and theory and practice go together this way. But in the end, in Buddhism, it's the experience of emptiness that liberates you from suffering. So, intellectual answers, logical answers will not be the therapeutic result that we're looking for, that we want. They're not the proper, they're not the reality that we're looking for. We're looking for a release from suffering and true happiness. It's an experience that cures that, not a logical argument. Logical argument gets you, and this is where it's almost like Thomas Aquinas in medieval philosophy, the difference between faith and reason, in the sense that reason takes you right to the edge, but jumping over into off the cliff, and maybe that's a bad analogy, but sort of going further is what you need to do via faith or via practice, kind of a non-conceptual route. So yogic direct perceivers are quite different. There's this idea that when you've got your regular direct perceivers with sensation and your inferential mind, there's this idea that the mind is always conceptual. Now, senses are non-conceptual in the sense that you're in a relationship, a direct relationship with an object, but everyone knows that your senses are always processed conceptually. So that's why, your mental sense consciousness is one of the six, and why we have mental factors. We have all these conceptual minds, processing, what they call secondary minds. You've got your primary mind, which is gaze object, and all the secondary minds are what's mediating it. So what's interesting about Buddhism is that the yogic direct perceiver is this idea that you're transcending your mediated mind, your conceptual mediated mind, right? You're sort of leaving your conceptuality behind. So where we're doing it with this is when we're meditating on emptiness. So why they call it yogic direct perceiver, of course, yoga in Sanskrit means to yoke or tie together, right? So this is where, everyone does hatha yoga, that your yoga teacher tells you that's what yoga means. Yoking or tying your mind, ordinary mind, to your divine mind. And, your asanas are about loosening up your subtle body, that you're able to meditate with Raja Yoga, blah, 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 and you get, your big Atman Brahman experience. So, it's a similar thing here, is that yogic direct perceivers is that at a certain point, your conceptual mind falls away and you and the object become one, right? You perceive that. So where we talk about with that is the idea that you're sort of transcending sort of the more conventional conceptual mind and looking at, let's say, the ultimate nature of an object, its emptiness, right? So in the Sautrantika school, for instance, the lower school on emptiness, they talk about yogic direct perceivers when you're meditating, let's say, in subtle impermanence, right? So if you have, let's say you set everything up intellectually, where you're meditating, you've gotten teachings on what is impermanence, and let's say the classic Buddhist thing is that you meditate on a river, which is a good thing. River's always changing. Where's the river, right? You can't step in the same river twice, like Heraclitus would say. So you're meditating on the river. So you have an object there, and it's in a conceptual object. It's the river. And at each moment, like you'll be looking, and you get distracted and you fall asleep and you wake up again, and it's hot. It's in India, you're on the Ganges, and you're like, ugh. And you're looking, it's like, yeah, it's the same river. But let's say you've developed the 9 tranquil abiding stages, and you have a mind training, you're completely concentrated. When you end up engaging with that object of impermanence, you will see subtle impermanence. Like you will see that everything is changing, like at each moment. So I read it, it's in one of Jack Kornfield's books, either him or Joseph Goldstein talked about, you can see he talked about getting to that state where he was having a realization of subtle impermanence. And he said what was amazing is that each moment was multiple moments, like a state of absolute self-differentiating difference. So even if he had a pain, let's say a mosquito bit him, that one experience, he said, would be countless experiences of feeling his cells and like the mosquito sticking its little proboscis or whatever in him. He felt all these things and he could see everything changing. So that would be a yogic direct perceiver. Do you see? It's almost like transcending the concept.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference. So the one we're concerned about is not is a yogic direct perceiver with emptiness. So they have it here, and I'll shut up in a sec here. I've been going on for a big rant here for 20 minutes, but Buddhism, we talk about, I think it's like a fact connecting term and a term connecting term. I can't remember, whereas this is that many philosophies in the world don't make this distinction, but Buddhism does. They say there's a difference between having an experience of something and then just knowing it intellectually. So they say, for instance, that let's say a term connected, I think this is how they do it, but like knowing the meaning of a word in terms of its meaning or its sense. In other words, you've never been to India, let's say, but when I say the word India, that conjures up all sorts of pictures or images for you, like all YouTube videos you've seen. You've got, let's say, the Indian restaurant, you go to down the street, you read books on India, you're getting excited to go to India, you go next year, so you have all this intellectual knowledge. So when people talk about India to you, you can talk to them at a certain level, just talking about what India means to you, right? Like just understanding these kind of intellectual pictures. Now, when you go to India, let's say you spend a whole year there, India means something very different to you now, because you have the fact connecting term, like the experience, the content of that experience adds something to the concept of India, right? So when you come back and people talk to you about India, you've got this very, very deep knowledge now that's very, very different. I mean, I know a lot of philosophies that deny this distinction, but in Buddhism, they don't, right? So what we're doing with emptiness is we're working with these inferential, indirect conceptual minds. And we're just setting this up to understand the meaning of emptiness, what it means. And we study all this. We're studying valid cognition, we're this. But in the end, when we're meditating and get the experience, that's the concept falls away and you get a more experiential content. And that's a yogic direct perceiver, right? So this is a difference in the 5 paths between the path of preparation and the path of seeing or insight. Is the path of preparation is with tranquil abiding. In other words, not just an intellectual mind, with a concentrated mind, you are meditating on an intellectual image of emptiness. Let's say non-inherent reality, the fact that nothing is not in a relationship or whatever, dependent arising being the best image of emptiness. So when I think of dependent arising, I'm meditating on emptiness here. I can think about, let's say, a seed becoming a tree or all these things, everything interdependent. In particular, seeing, like meditating, like on the dependent origination of my sense of self, a label on the base of the 5 aggregates, whatever you want to have as your object of emptiness. But with the merit and with the purification, there's a point where you get a breakthrough. And this is where, like our great teacher, Annual Ann says, you don't jump off the cliff, you fall off it. It's sort of a discovery. I don't think you can actually say, okay, whatever, in 50 minutes from now, I'm going to have an experience of emptiness. There's a point where it just kind of happens. I guess there's a point just where if you've been training for the Ironman, there's a point where you can finally do this amazing marathon and do it. You know, like there's just a point where you've built up enough of the habits and the energy, the momentum, that you have this breakthrough experience. And that's what they call path of seeing or path of insight. I like path of seeing because that's where you see emptiness directly. And that's the yogic direct perceiver. And that's when you're an Arya, a higher being. You're no longer a human being, right? As Geshe Michael says, you divide the world into people that have seen emptiness and people that haven't. So, and that's a yogic direct perceiver, and it's a cessation realization. There's no backpedaling from that. You've seen things, and that's so like a yogic direct perceiver. It's a direct perception, and it's tied together. You can't pull it apart. That's a long-winded explanation, but does that kind of answer a bit, Maureen? Or
Yep, that was great. That clarified quite a bit.
okay, I hope so. So. Anything else, Deborah? Any question? Or no, you're good. Okay. And Colin, anything? We can end a little. We don't have to go the full way here. If we have, we can end a little early if you want. That's fine too.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
No, in the Pali, they use phrases like I think the Buddha coined. He talked about 3 stages of experience. He talks about Suttamaya Panya, Jantamaya Panya, and Bhavamaya Panya, which is book learning, sort of learning through ideation, through contemplation, and then Bhavamaya Panya, which is direct experience of the actual, whatever the experience might be. I'm wondering, does Bhavamaya Panya kind of sort of equate with this, the ideas that you've just been sharing? Can you see parallels there?
I think so. I don't know enough about that. You're probably much better learned person on this. I mean, I'm one of these, friend of mine's a Theravada teacher, and she's making fun of me because I don't know the Pali scriptures of the sutras. And she's like, oh my God, just like, I remember once being made fun of at a Zen temple in New York City, how I couldn't sit properly. And what, you've been a Buddhist for 20 years and you can't sit, what's wrong with you? And then it was the same thing, I'm Tibetan Buddhist, right? It's a little different, but it's the same thing with my friends always quoting sutras and stuff. I'm like, oh, I don't know that. She's like, you don't know this? Like, this is so embarrassing. It's like Christians that have never read the Bible, like, well, oh my God, what's wrong with you? So I don't know that enough, but it sounds from what you've said to be a distinction that makes sense to me and stuff I might have read in Tibetan texts, because the book learning also connotates the idea of a shared social environment, like a cultural education that you have. Like, even if we, all of us know what the word karma means socially in a superficial way. And then it's kind of like the ideation or contemplative way would be more of your own research or more your own education, going deeper with the material rather than just sort of the superficial cultural level.
Mhm.
Of course, direct experience, which is the most important thing. But you see this, the whole, oftentimes you get this is an old kind of stupid way, but back in Tibet, you'd have certain narrow-minded sectarian people that would have these cartoon understandings of different lineages, and they'd make fun of them, and then always say, oh, Eucalyptus, all you do is read books, you never get anywhere. Now, there's always people like that just run around and read books, but there was this idea where Tsongkhapa, following more the Indian tradition, said that there is a value to learning all this, so you get the correct information, because a lot of times just learning socially about something, it's wrong, or it's not complete, or there's whatever. And even just trusting your own views on stuff. Like, my dad was always he's very spiritual but anti-religious, and he always made fun of a lot of the sort of more, they lived in, my parents in Western Alberta, surrounded by all these evangelical Christian people who were just wonderful. I mean, a lot of the neighbors were great, but he always would laugh, as he always said, well, according to my research in the Bible, and my dad always like, the moment people start saying that, I know this is completely wrong, right? Because it's just their opinion on something. But anyway, but you can see that this sort of, you need to do a little bit more work than even your own personal research. I mean, you need your teachers, you need sort of almost like a little bit more of a cultured or educated community of different people helping you out, so you're on the right track. And then that's the hard work comes, where you just have to put the time in experientially by meditating. So you see someone like our teacher, Zasep Rinpoche, he's more of a yogi, he's not an intellectual, he's not running around debating and even teaching very high. He made fun of me for years being the kind of person that I am, but he's always telling people just to sort of do the practice, sit down, do the work. Once you get the correct object, sit down and cook it, then you'll get the experiential result, right? But the intellectual stuff is important. That's my first teacher, again, Kelsing Tarch, and his teacher, I don't know who it was, I'm trying to think if it was, but he always said, his teacher told him, many people meditate on emptiness, few have the correct object. Like, you have to be really clear what emptiness is and what it's not, otherwise you get different results, right? As you know, so we want a very specific result.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. That's a great distinction, by the way. That's very, very good.
Unless anybody else wanted to pipe in, I had a little question.
Yeah.
Using the moon as a metaphor for emptiness, that wasn't clear to me. I didn't catch that quite.
Okay.
Can you pitch that again, please?
Yeah, off the top of my head, and I'll probably be wrong a little bit. So I recommend that if you can get, I know I've got it somewhere out there in the bookshelf there. Ken Rinpoche wrote a commentary to that Wheel of Life. It's also in LamRim. If you read, I think it's in the intermediate scope. So if you have any good LamRim text from Tsongkhapa or one of the Dalai Lamas or something, it'll be in there. But in the Wheel of Life teaching, like I said, you've got two different reflective surfaces as analogies to work with. So the first one is, of course, Yama, Lord of Death, or Grim Reaper, is holding the mirror up, and you just see the Wheel of Life, which is your reflection, right? All the different intricate stuff. Now, ironically, like I said, because it's a reflection, it's the idea that your your mind is like a mirror, so it doesn't have to be that reflection, right? Like it's like a fun mirror at the, well, in the old days, you go to the country fair or whatever, and you have the mirror, you look in where you're really fat, or makes you all kind of wobbly or something. It's kind of this wrong reflection. But technically, if the mirror ends up being cleaned, you get a clear reflection of yourself. And in this case, it would just sort of maybe be showing emptiness, or on a conventional way, yourself as a deity or something like that. So I guess to show, they could show that. I mean, if whatever, 2,500 years ago, Buddha had that painted a different way, where he's got two mirrors. One's a clear, nice mirror, and the other mirror is the we're holding up, right? That would be kind of a nice way of teaching it. But he doesn't have that. Instead, what represents the mirror of mind meditating or seeing emptiness directly is a full moon, right? At the top of the thing. And they usually have Buddha on the other side, and he's pointing to it, in the famous, Zen pointing to the moon. But what's interesting is they have him outside of the wheel of life. It's this idea, I guess, of transcending your worldly samsaric world that you're in. Technically, there's no outside, there's only inside. So Buddha pointing at the moon should sort of be in the mirror at some point, in some place, right? But I guess the point that he's making is it's a different space altogether, a different mind that we're talking about, right? It's not this worldly, messed up, conceptual, deluded, suffering mind. Is that clear? So they have the full moon because it's luminous. You know what I mean? Is that a good metaphor for emptiness?
Actually, it now works for me better. Yeah, I think I was probably complicating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got her.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Good. Like in the end, you see everything. I mean, literally everything's just a metaphor. I don't want to be too deconstructionist here, but it ends up, it's just semantic. Until you realize emptiness, everything's just a symbol or a metaphor, an analogy. And so some of them work and some of them don't. And some of them are confusing. And we need, now what's happening with Western Buddhism is we're getting, we're getting a global culture now in the 21st century. So we're getting new metaphors for that. But even with Western Buddhism, we're getting new metaphors, just like they had to bring all those ones into Tibet. Like I said, probably when a lot of us started in the 1990s, you still had all the old geshes using all the Tibetan analogies, like, well, when you churn butter, and if you be careful not to put the yak too close to the tent because they'll knock it over. And of course, you're always like, what? Like, this isn't working. And then you read all the old Indian metaphors from whatever, 2,000 years ago, and you're like, oh man, they don't make sense at all. There's supposed to be things in your daily life that give you the aha comprehension, right? So the moon, the full moon, that's, that was one of the things everyone has back in the day, right? To sort of show that clear luminosity. And moonlight's a beautiful, like if you have, just like the other night there with that wolf moon, it's quite something. It's in the luminosity of it, it's just kind of like it's almost like a breakthrough experience seeing it a little bit, right? So yeah. So anything else, or we all good for now? So, and again, do your own research with this. I'm just going a lot of this off the top of my head and with my own study. And of course, some of it might be wrong or anything else. I'm not a geshe or a scholar. I've just, read a lot of books over the years, have a lot of experience. But again, if you find with any of this stuff, the mistakes are mine. If you find stuff that's mistaken or a better way of putting it or doing it, please type up, even in class or whatever, just say, hey, because, obviously, I can make mistakes with this stuff. So what we'll do next, if I guess we can just end here, if everyone's okay. And the next class, there's two classes that go together, but the next two of them I want to do, like I've got a set number. I mean, we'll be done this coming year at some point for some of the, at least this kind of the stuff that I wanted to offer people. But the next two Asian Classic Institute classes, courses kind of go together. Traditionally, if you look at it, course 5, course 6. So course 5 is on karma, which is Abhidharma Kosha and karma, and then course 6 is Diamond Cutter. So those are my two of my favorites. And really, I don't want to say that if you get those, you don't need anything else, but they're that good in the sense that they're so comprehensive and wonderful and very, very practical and helpful. So the next one I'll start next weekend, because I've got close to a month off work now, which is good, is doing course 5 on Abhidharma and karma. So that'll be a good one. Depending, we might even have 2 review classes on that, because I find with karma, that's everyone wants to talk about. That's where kind of like the rubber hits the road a little bit. You can talk about all this intellectual stuff and valid cognition, blah, blah, blah. But karma is always practical, and everyone always has lots of questions and stories about that and want clarifications. So that's really, really good. Anyway, I'm looking forward to that one. So thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the wonderful questions. They're always like super, super good and get me thinking. And thanks for your continued participation and interest as well. So
Thank you.
okay, so let's just take a moment to dedicate here, just being together and studying together, walking the path together as Sangha jewel to one another here. I think the blessings of all Buddhas and all holy beings of our gurus, truth of karma, our causes and their effects, power of a pure spirit intention, our intention always to have it as bodhicitta. May all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled. Okay, we'll just press stop here.